Guyana, and welcome to this week's program of The Public Interest. I am Malaika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us. On this edition, we will examine the importance of creating a secure business environment, and of course, we'll also zone in on the future of mining in Guyana. As always, it is my pleasure to introduce to you, I should say, reintroduce to you the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Malaika.
And additionally, today's journalists are Davina Samaru from Guyana Times Evening News, and of course, Mr. Paul McAdam from the Government Information Agency, GINA. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
First off, Mr. President, security continues to be an important area of concern for our country. If it is not quickly fixed, it can certainly have some serious effects on the business sector, the business community. What will you say at this point to ensure that the business sector feels a sense of security in terms of developing that sector?
Well, most important is the support by the business sector, in fact, the entire community, for the police reform program. We've already embarked on this program. As you can see, there has been a positive response. Many more crimes are being solved. It is true that many more crimes are being committed as well. But it is clear that many more crimes are being solved. It is clear that there are more policemen on the street and going into the hinterland. And it is my view that we've been past the worst. We've seen the worst of the crime surge. And things can get better slowly, but there needs to be a lot more work done in the Guyana Police Force in terms of training, in terms of giving the policemen better salaries, in terms of providing better equipment for the police. So these are some of the provisions which were promised at the Discipline Forces Commission 10 years ago, and we're working to implement those provisions now.
Okay, thank you, sir. And before I give our journalists an opportunity to pose their questions, on mining a bit, our concern is that most times the indigenous communities do not necessarily benefit in a large way that they should benefit from mining. What measures will be put in place to ensure that the current measures are strengthened to ensure they benefit?
Well, they are doing the best they could. If you go into the hinterland, you will find that many miners at what I call the individual or the placer level are indigenous people. And I've been into the Mazruni up to yesterday. I was in the Cuyuni River. 2 days ago, I was in the Cuyuni River. And there are many indigenous miners now. So we've found that in many communities where the indigenous people themselves are in possession of their village lands, they've started mining on their own. So they're getting involved. It's an entrepreneurial business. They don't have to be told to do so by the government. And you'll find that there are quite a few quite rich ones as well. So it is at the individual level. Of course, at the high level, at the industrial level, we depend a lot on foreign direct investment. So many of the big investors are operating at an industrial scale. But many of the medium and small miners are local, and a lot of them are indigenous people.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well said. I'll now give the journalists on the panel an opportunity to pose their questions. And of course, traditionally, the lady goes before the gent, but in this case, the two have agreed to allow the gent to go first. Paul?
Right, sir. Paul McAdam, GINA. Touching on mining as we're on that topic, what are some of the concessions that you would like to implement with the small and medium scale miners? And I know you declared your intention to make sure the industry remains viable and a significant contributor to the local economy. What are some of these concessions you're looking at?
It's not so much our concessions, it's a matter of removing impediments and inequalities. And in the first instance, we want to make sure that mining is safe and that the miners themselves are protected from injury and death. And this is most important for us because, in fact, human lives are more important than gold. And we want to make the industry safe. There are regulations, and we want to give the miners the assurance that we are going to enforce those regulations. The other area is that we have to introduce new technology. What you see in mining nowadays in Guyana is that we have a 150-year-old industry which was started by individual miners, pork knockers, placer mining, and then some businessmen came in, and these became medium-scale miners, and now you have industrial miners from overseas with huge machines. So there are three types of mining taking place side by side, and we would like to see, we would like to assure Guyanese miners that there will be a level playing field, that they will get an opportunity to bid for properties and to conduct mining, even though it's at a small scale, just as we encourage foreign direct investment. We want to make sure too that the environment is not damaged. Of course, you know, as the saying, if you want an omelette, you have to break the egg. But at the same time, we want to assure future generations that we have inherited something from our foreparents and we want to pass it on to them, more or less in the same form that we inherited. We know that we have to take the gold out of the soil, but we want to replant the soil. Unless we do that, the mining areas will continue to breed mosquitoes, spreading dengue, malaria, filaria, and other vector-borne diseases. So we want to create a safe environment for miners. So it's not so much about concessions. It is about safety. It's about level playing field. There are some things that they requested, you know, like removal of taxes on certain commodities, duty-free vehicles, and so on. But mining has been, for several years, the single most important commodity in our gross domestic product. And we want to preserve the status of mining, and we are in discussions continuously with the miners to find out what they want and how the two sides, state and industry, can meet.
Davina.
Thank you. Mr. Granger, could you say if government will be taking any immediate steps to reform the GGMC, given the findings from the COI as it relates to the mining debts and the illegal practices in the mining industry?
My interpretation of the report of the COI, Commission of Inquiry, is that you're looking at the human element. We're looking at the removal of graft and corruption, and at the same time we're looking at better enforcement. So it is not so much reform, it is a matter of ensuring that you select the right people and that you have supervisory systems to prevent wrongdoing. And in so doing, you're looking at the quality of human resource, the quality of management, the quality of supervision. What we want to do, and what we want to assure the country of, is that we want a group of unbribable, unbribable civil servants, that people will be well paid, and anybody caught accepting a bribe or even giving a bribe is going to be prosecuted. So we have the systems in place, we have the laws in place, but we want to make sure that when a mines officer goes out there, he is not going to be approached by a crooked miner and bribed. Now, if he does not do his job, we will have problems. We are going to have more mine cave-in because there are regulations determining how pits are to be constructed. If miners are allowed to breach those regulations, we have these terrible accidents, like at Mawasi in May. There's 10 people died. Can you imagine a country with a population of 750,000? What if we had a population of 300 million like United States? Just multiply that 10 by 100, you know? And it's a terrible disaster. Many people in Guyana don't realize what a disaster. Every single month, on average, a miner dies in the hinterland. So we're talking about enforcement, we're talking about the integrity of mines officers, we're talking about supervision, we're talking about the human element, more than concessions, more than anything else. That is the reform. We are going to have better quality people, unbribable people.
There are no follow-ups on the mining.
Yes, there is actually. Okay. As we're on the issue, sir, it is, well, how are the moves coming to address the cases of illegal miners like the Gamperos from the other countries coming in? And
it is a question of enforcement, of inspectors, of mines officers going out there, asking people for their license, asking people for their permits, and ensuring that the mining is done in accordance with the law. Now, what you have here is perhaps the single richest industry in the country. But it is often administered in a lawless way. I mean, you don't see the same thing happening in rice, you don't see it happening in sugar, you don't see it happening in bauxite. Why should it happen in mine? Mine should be the best regulated industry in the country. But unfortunately, once you go west of Essequibo, you seem to be living in lawless land. You know, it's like some Wild West. That has got to stop. We have to make sure that mining, particularly gold and diamond mining, must be run, must be administered on the basis of the law. We have to enforce the law. The law is there. I am satisfied. We must make sure that the enforcement is put in.
And if I may, one more.
You're allowed.
Our efforts being made to explore the push for the mining of rare earth metals like manganese and so on. Because I know the tech giants are using these rare earth metals, and I'm pretty sure that we may have deposits here. We'll be looking at geo-mapping the terrain to ascertain what and where we have it.
Well, it depends largely on private enterprise and foreign direct investment. The government on its own is not pursuing those rare metals, and we don't have the resources, and we don't intend to compete with private miners in this regard. So if foreign investors come in and they wish to do that, we will encourage them. But we will provide what I would call the level playing field. We want to provide a regulatory or a regulated framework within which mining can take place. Once it starts, we'll make sure that the environment is protected, that the indigenous people, the residents of the hinterland, are not abused, and that the miners conform with the law. That's what we want to do. We don't want to take the place of the miners.
Sure. I'd like to move on soon, but go ahead.
One more question. Could you say what is government's position on the capping of mining lands per person? The capping of mining lands. Recently, Minister Raffle Trotman announced that government is considering the decision of limiting the amount of lands allocated to person.
Well, it's still something under consideration, because obviously, if you are going to attract industrial scale, large scale miners, they have to have access to more lands. But at the same time, we don't want to give up more lands that we can control with our own regulatory agencies. So it is something under consideration, and Minister Trotman plans to bring that to the cabinet.
Now we can move on to your possible questions on securing the business sector.
Right. I will take the first one.
Go ahead.
So our plans to reduce the cost of electricity. I know you always say that production really depends on the cost of electricity, and that's a main factor for reducing the cost of production and increasing business and leveling the playing field. Will government be looking via the South-South cooperation method to increase maybe small-scale hydro dams to provide power and alternatives like solar power to drive the sector?
You're quite right. You put your finger on one of the most expensive elements in the economy, in production, and that is energy. Now, we are looking at different forms of hydro. There are about 100 sites in Guyana where hydroelectricity could be generated. Not one, there are many. Most intelligent persons who've studied the Amila Falls, because Amila always comes up, realize that it was not a good scheme. There was never a single bill brought before Parliament dealing with the overall scheme. A bill came to raise the debt ceiling. A bill came to define the area that was likely to be flooded. People up to now do not know much about how electricity was to be produced. Similarly, there's another plan to have a dam at a place called Cheong Falls in the Patara-Siparuni region. Nobody's heard anything about it. But there are 100 sites, and we will look at the small sites, what they call run of the river. We will look at the medium sites, and we look at the big sites. But it's a work in progress. But hydro is not all. We can explore solar power. There is an average of about 7 hours of sunlight a day, all year, on average, of course, in the Rupununi. 7 hours of sunlight that could generate a lot of solar energy. If we get away from this obsession with these little solar panels, we have to have whole solar farms that can power whole communities. the hospitals, the community centers, the schools, you know, the homes, not just these small panels which can just power up 1 or 2 bulbs within your house. So we have to explore solar power. We have to explore wind power. Some people are already doing it. You know, even in Northern Europe, you see these huge wind farms powering industry, powering whole villages, whole towns. But in Guyana, we seem to be very reluctant to take that step. So water is one, hydropower is one, wind is one, solar is one, and you can use biogas. Now, we generate a lot of waste in this country, and all of those garbage dumps, I mean, if anybody had passed what used to be called the Le Repentier dump maybe 10 or 15 years ago, sometimes you see this glow, you see smoke, because that waste generates gas. That gas in other countries is trapped and used to generate energy. I've seen it myself. So you can have biogas, you can have solar, you can have water, you can have wind, you can have wave. These are renewable forms of energy which were never fully exploited. Yes, I am confident that at the village level, at the neighborhood level, we could produce cheap renewable energy which can power industry. But we are technically sitting on our hands as far as power generation is concerned, as far as energy is concerned.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can only allow one other question on business before we must move to the next segment.
Okay, President Granger, in relation to the current issue with the government and the Berbice Bridge Company, could you say what is government's position and outlook to public-private partnerships in the future?
I don't think that the matter, the controversy surrounding the bridge, the Berbice Bridge, is a reflection of government policy. We want to encourage public-private partnerships. We have to develop this entire hinterland. Much of Western Essequibo, you do not have proper bridges, proper roads, proper stellings. And right now, to cross the Essequibo, you have to pay a private entrepreneur to cross the Essequibo at Kurupukari. And nobody complains, but the government doesn't try to shut it down. What happened in the case of the Berbice Bridge is that we received numerous complaints from the residents of East Berbice Quarantine, that is the Region 6, that the rates were oppressive, and it was actually hampering business. It was hampering children's access to school. It was hampering development. And that's why we took the steps that we took. So, right, we're still in discussion. The case isn't closed. The Minister of Finance is engaging the company. And at the end of it, we expect that there will be a solution which is acceptable to the ordinary people of East Berbice Quarantine, who we are pledged to look out for. So we do not regard it as typical. The arrangements, the architecture of that business deal was very opaque. NISL, which is a state firm, was involved. NIS, which is a state firm, was involved. But apparently the power to make decisions is not in the hands of the biggest contributors to that scheme. So we were opposed to the use of state funds in that particular way, in the way it was used in the Berbice Bridge Company. So there wouldn't be a recurrence of that. And we are in discussions, and we hope that there will be an amicable solution to that. But we want to encourage other partnerships in the hinterland. Some of those roads, Barticum, Pataro Road, the river crossings, the Rupununi, these can be areas in which private citizens and the government could combine their energies to make sure that there is proper infrastructure in this country. The Berbice is not typical.
In keeping with the same theme, Berbice, do you think there's need for more transparency as we move forward with these kind of partnerships? There
will be transparency under this administration, and that the lack of transparency is what contributed to the present problem in the Berbice River Bridge. We were asking questions in the opposition all the time, and we were not given the proper answers about the role of NIS, because we felt that the NIS was making a very risky investment. The role of NISL, we know that NISL was using state funds, and we were never given proper answers. So we do not regard the Bobby's Bridge as typical, and we are going to make sure that in future there is going to be transparency as long as state funds are involved. And I'm very confident that the new Minister of Finance is committed to making sure that there are transparent transactions as long as state funds are involved.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're now free to move on to the next segment where you get to pose questions outside of the initial topics that would have been identified today. And this time I must begin with Davina.
Okay, President Granger, could you say what are some of the public projects, if any, that his government is currently pursuing?
Infrastructure?
Infrastructure-wise, like in any areas, but any public projects?
Right now we are in the area of policy making and enforcement of the standards to make sure that our main industries, particularly sugar, rice, bauxite, enjoy a more stable international market. This has been our biggest problem. It is not that we're going on any infrastructure project. We are making sure that there is good governance in all of the areas in agriculture. You know, we inherited a problem with sugar. We've got to sell sugar, rice also. We're looking for new rice markets. We receive indications from Venezuela that they may not be interested in renewing the agreement. So that is the type of work we're doing right now. We're not in big buildings. A lot of the buildings have to be rehabilitated. We are looking at local government elections in terms of making sure that we reintroduce new neighborhood democratic councils throughout the country. We're looking at developing 4 new tongues at Maburumu, Bartica, Madia, and Lethem. We're looking at improving healthcare. These are the things we're looking at in this first year. So we're not looking at big projects, we're looking at quality of life, better quality of life. There will be projects. Some projects are in the pipeline, and you know, for example, we have to ensure that there's a proper boat, ocean-going ferry that goes up to Burima Waini region. Right now, that entire region, 4 times the size of Trinidad and Tobago, does not have a reliable supply. So, in terms of project, yes, that is something we have to look at, but it's not going to be short-term. But there are lots of things occurring on a day-to-day basis which impact the lives of ordinary people. We are convinced that if we can get children in school, if we can remove some of the poverty that affects families, we are going to get more people participating in the economy. Right now, there's too much unemployment. There are too many young people dropping out of school, and that is what I think is affecting development. Not the absence of projects, the absence of good life.
Your turn, Paul.
As we just touched on it a little bit, you mentioned children dropping out of school or youths dropping out of school. Do you think the time has come for more parents to be aware of the importance of education? Because it seems as though some parents, they just give the children the basic and then it's off to make some money and they're not thinking long term. What's your view on that?
Well, in 1876, a long, long time ago, education was made compulsory. In fact, parents could be prosecuted under the law for not taking their children to primary school. Primary education is compulsory in this country. But what has happened is that poverty has swamped many households. And sometimes they just can't afford to go to school. They had nothing to eat in the morning. They don't have shoes to wear when they go to school. They can't afford the transportation. So we have had to take a very humane line. For example, providing what they call the 3 Bs, bicycles, boats, or buses to get children to school. That is what we want to. Parents are aware. Parents are aware. But if you're living up in Palmer Road, how are you going to get $5,000 a week to get your child down to charity? You see, that is where the problem is. Sometimes you have no money to do anything at all. The mother may be just on the brink, or the head of the family may just be earning the basic minimum. Sometimes children don't go to school because they have no transportation. They have no food to eat in the mornings. So these are the impediments to good education. the parents are very much aware, and I think all parents know that the key to success in life is through the education system. And once those material conditions are met, I am confident that more children will be in school, and we are going to get a better quality of citizen. We have got to do other work too. At Sierra Party College of Education, we've got to make sure that the quality of teaching is high. But right now, at the basic level, we just want to get children in school and make sure that they don't drop out. And to do that, we are going to take every reasonable measure to provide the material circumstances to enable children to get to school.
At this point, I'd like to advise you to choose your remaining questions wisely, since we only have very little time left. So I think it's the Venus turn.
Yes, okay. President Granger, your government committed earlier to launching an investigation into the extrajudicial killings dating as far back as 2006. Could you say what progress have you made so far into launching these investigations, and particularly which cases would you like to look into?
Well, all of the unnatural deaths, actually, there's something called the Coroner's Act, which requires magistrates in all the magisterial districts to investigate or conduct an inquest into any unnatural death. As long as the police report something, you know, somebody, a body is found in the foreshore, or a body is found on the side of the road, or in an abandoned house, you know the stories from the newspaper. Those that should be investigated. How far have we gone? Well, we're not looking at the spectacular deaths, you know, like the assassination of Minister Satio. So we're looking at all deaths because people come from families, you know, it might be a Donna Herod in Buxton or something, you know, some boys who've been shot and, you know, in Mandela Avenue, whatever it is. And we want to investigate every single death. So we're not looking for high-profile cases. We have not actually started, because to do these investigations, you need to acquire evidence. It means that the police force has to be strengthened. The police force has to bring that evidence. Otherwise, you may conduct an investigation and nobody shows up. This is what is said to have happened in a particular high-profile case with the death of the assassination of Minister Saw. All of the witnesses apparently have been killed or been made to disappear. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want to mount several investigations and all of them peter out. So we are in the process of ensuring that there is a proper, I would call, a coroner's department. The Minister of Legal Affairs is actually looking at that right now to make sure that once we get going, every death that is reported will be investigated. If the magistrate in that district cannot do it because of pressure of work, you know, day-to-day crimes, everyday crimes, there is going to be a dedicated coroner who is going to investigate those deaths. Once we feel that there is evidence of homicide, or the evidence points to a particular murder or an executioner, and we've been having a lot of those, you know, we are going to proceed along those lines. For example, some of the murders might have been family murders, husband, wife, and that type of thing. So we're taking our time, but we're going to get there, and we want to make sure that all of the deaths are investigated, and never again should we have a period of Guyanese history in which the police have to create a monument to the number of policemen killed over that period. At Bartica, there's another monument to the people who were killed in Bartica. In Friendship, there's a monument. Nobody knows how many people died in that period, you know, between 2000 and 2008. So we are doing it step by step. We need the evidence, we need the structures. So we don't want to rush in, you know, without the structure. Once we start, there's going to be a coroner going through every single file. We have a list of the deaths. And we're going, that's the way we're proceeding. But we're proceeding.
Final question goes to you, Paul.
I will take a slightly different path. The open park has been doing well. The environs around here are being beautified. Just quickly, your recollection of the area in days past.
Well, that used to be a race course. I actually attended races there, and that's why the extension of Crow Street is still called Homestretch Avenue because that was the home stretch after the horses came around. But it was meant to be a civic center. There was a plan by the previous administration, the PNC administration, to put civic buildings, you know, public buildings there. And we want to, at another point in time, there was an intention that it should be used like for football in the afternoons, so children from nearby in Lodge and other areas could come and play football. And there's no concept that it should be used for the 50th anniversary celebration, so there could be some public displays there. So we want to keep it open, we want to keep it green, and we want to make it accessible to the citizens of Georgetown. I don't want to see a housing scheme there.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have on this edition of The Public Interest. Thank you to Davina and thank you to Paul. I am Malaika Ramsey. Join us again next time.